This is a Okay, I think we're live. I am with talking with Emerald today, and I'm gonna let her introduce herself and tell a little bit about her background, and then we'll talk about mental health, trauma, and neurodivergence.
Okay. So hi everyone. My name is Emerald. I'm currently a psychology major. I have a goal of becoming a therapist. I kind of want to specialize in neurodivergence and giftedness. So it's like a thing I want to talk about, but I'm still trying to figure out the path for that because it's not exactly um I can't exactly see it right now. So I'm trying to put that together. And I'm also an ESL tutor, so I teach English as a second language online on a site called Preply, which I really enjoy that. And yeah, a bit about myself. I'm just like insatiably curious about everything. So I love learning and teaching and just spreading as much joy as possible. And yeah.
Oh. Where are you in the program now, and what path do you kind of see it taking, or what are some of the visions for it that you have?
So originally, so I'm still doing undergrad. I have one more semester. I kind of gave myself another semester to kind of figure out what I want to do because I still want to be a therapist, but I was on the route of like specializing in humanistic theory. So like
Hmm.
Carl Rogers and all that, which I still really love. But then 2 semesters ago, I fell into Dabrowski and started researching
Oh,
him. And I was like, why isn't this talked about in my program? Like it's all just Carl Rogers, Carl Jung, Sigmund Freud, like all the top thinkers. But I've never heard Dabrowski's name in any of my classes. So then I kind of fell down this rabbit hole, so to speak, of like Dabrowski and kind of Carl Jung, because he kind of touches upon like, especially like MBTI and all that, Enneagram, that really interested me. And so now I'm just trying to figure out like how to uh, connect all of those together and find a program that will allow me to do that, if that makes sense.
To like kind of find your niche.
Yeah.
What did you ask about Dabrowski to any of your professors? What did they say?
I brought him up briefly in like a behavioral psychology class, and the professor kind of got annoyed and was like, "You're an
What?
undergrad. How do you know about this? Like, are you doing research outside?" Like, I'm always discouraged to speak my mind and speak about my intellectual interests. Uh, and that kind of threw me off my path a bit.
That's throwing me off too.
Yeah. Like, I thought college was a place to like share new ideas and expand upon deeper ideas. But in my
Uh-huh.
experience, I've had really good professors and really weird professors that either think like I'm trying to like challenge them, like I view them on my level or something, and I'm like a know-it-all or something. And that's not what I'm trying to do. So when I started like asking about Dabrowski and like positive disintegration, it kind of got like weird responses.
Gee, I hope you get to do it as a grad student somewhere at least.
That's what I'm hoping. Yeah.
Maybe I know we've talked about Dabrowski on this show before. I talked about it some with Patty Williams, who was on as well. Maybe you can give like a little brief introduction for anyone that might be unfamiliar with Dabrowski and his theories.
So I'm still learning about it. So I don't know if I have like an accurate definition, but to me, it's like, um, I know there's different levels, like when you're encountering a positive disintegration, like it's kind of like, uh, it's connected to like personality development, I think. And like, I'm trying to think of like a way to simplify it. Maybe you have a better
Well,
definition.
it's the theory of positive disintegration. Like if you Google him on Wikipedia, it'll give his biography, but then it'll lead you to the positive disintegration page, which is kind of what I guess the phrase that his theory is encapsulated under. But
Yeah.
it's the idea that it like crises, anxiety, depression, negative emotional states, instead of being bad things, are actually good things because they drive growth and they kind of disintegrate or help to disintegrate the surface personality that you absorb from your socialization, and allows you to discover your authentic values that beneath all of that and start to develop more in line with your vision for yourself instead of society's vision. And there's different levels of development. Like at first, the disintegration can be spontaneous, either through an event or just kind of on its own as your values start to conflict with each other internally. But then at some point, you kind of achieve the ability to, like through awareness and becoming more aware of the disintegration, the ability to direct it and channel it in ways that are aligned with your higher sense of your ideal for yourself.
Yeah.
And he also developed the concept of the three what he calls the third factor. The first factor being nature and biology, like biological factors, innate genetics. The second factor being social, environmental, how you were raised, the culture, the messages you get from society. And then the third factor is the awareness of the first two factors, and using that awareness to kind of decide how they influence you and what actions you take based on the input from the first two factors. So I think that's briefly how I would describe it.
I think you described it beautifully, because those are the words I was looking for, because I was trying to describe, like, because I feel like, to be honest, I'm like in the middle of my own positive disintegration, because for the longest time I was convinced like I just wanted to go into like humanistic theory, which I still really appreciate. Like I really do think you need to view like your clients like as they're experts on themselves and all that. But then somewhere in between, like just seeing psychology the way it currently is, and like the medicalization and diagnosing everything and all of these other factors, I was like, I think there's something more to this and more to like the human experience, if that felt like it was some kind of positive disintegration happening within me.
Just like conceptually with your understanding of psychology itself. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah, because I started viewing it as like there's something else here, and that's when I kind of fell into the rabbit hole of like Dabrowski and Carl Jung, and just like almost getting it, like doing this like self-study and like versus like really believing what I was being taught in my classes, if that makes sense.
Oh, that makes perfect sense, especially for a gifted person. And you mentioned an interest in giftedness and neurodivergence. So maybe can you talk a little bit about that and what led you to, like, you're gifted yourself and neurodivergent?
So I'm on the fence of if I'm neurodivergent or not. I feel like that's one thing I want to talk about, because so in my experience so far, I feel like, in my opinion, I could be wrong, but I feel like giftedness could be its own neurodivergence, because there's so much overlap that I'm noticing, where it's like it's becoming really hard to decipher between like, is this giftedness or just maybe like leaning more towards like an autistic trait or ADHD, and there's like it's like all combined. And I feel like my experience currently, like I can't tell like certain traits, because I know when I talk to people outside of these circles and stuff, when I'm like, oh, I love reading and learning as much as I can, and like reading dictionaries and a thesaurus, and like this is what I like doing for fun, and like watching documentaries, like that thirst for knowledge, it's appreciated in academic setting, but outside of academia, it's like people are looking at you like, oh, is that like a autistic trait? And then for longest time, I'd be like, oh no, it's like more like giftedness. And then you bring up giftedness, and then I feel like people are like, oh, you think you're special, or you think this. And it's like, there's like a negative connotation societally with both giftedness and neurodivergence. So I'm trying to like, I'm still on that path of like figuring out what is what, if that makes sense.
I think everyone is. I think the clinicians are too. I have said over and over and over that to me, giftedness is a form of neurodivergence. Even if you don't have autism, ADHD, there's that diagram making its way around the internet with the three, like the Venn diagram of giftedness, ADHD, and autism, and how the traits meet in the middle. So I think those are very fuzzy categories. And if you look at it individually, which a humanistic perspective would, you kind of figure out the traits that each individual person in front of you has and how they manifest, and how, so like the curiosity and the wanting to learn and Could be the intellectual overexcitability, is how Dabrowski would phrase it, that shows up in giftedness in general, that innate curiosity. It could be hyperfocus if you're looking at it from an ADHD lens. It could be monotropism, which is kind of that attention tunnel that autistic people, that they say defines autism. So depending on what lens you look at it through, that one feature could appear as many different, but it's the feature itself, the trait, the curiosity. That's the
Yeah.
important thing. And yes, giftedness is very stigmatized, especially I grew up with kind of a positive identity around it because I had a lot of gifted support, but like as I got older, especially now, the trend seems to be moving away from gift. I thought it would get better as I got older, but like with so many other things, the trend seems to be moving to stigmatize giftedness even more as a form of elitism or inequity. And for me, like having that identity when I was younger really helped. But I'm wondering, did you have gifted programs growing up or other gifted peers to kind of help you develop a positive identity around it?
So I feel like I kind of was in between two worlds. So I had like more wealthy grandparents that really allowed me to explore my like curiosity, creativity, but more in the lens of like you're going to be successful academically versus
Mm.
like days where it was like I was really being pushed to um like when my school system, like there wasn't a gifted program, but a lot of like school psychologists, they gave me like a lot of tests as a kid. And I don't know if they were IQ tests or what they were, because I was just given a lot of like tests, which was weird because I wasn't fitting in with other kids. And I was like reading at an advanced level. I think I had some kind of like, I think it's called like hyperlexia.
Hyperlexia. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I am reading a lot of descriptions of that. And I'm like, that really resonates because that was me as a kid. So they would just give me all these tests, but I was never given like a descriptor or diagnosis of any kind, at least not to my awareness. I've had a very interesting experience, but so I wasn't put in gifted programs, but they did give me like a tutor. So I'd be taken out of classes and we'd read books, like high school level books, and then I'd be like sent back to the classroom. And that kind of was weird because then like I would come back to the general classroom, like talking about these advanced books.
Oh yeah.
And then that, unfortunately, I got bullied because of that. And yeah, then I was like severely bullied. So then I turned to like teaching, like kind of being like a classroom tutor, like a mini teacher. So I would just go around like teaching kids that were like disadvantaged or had learning disabilities. And that started at like age 7.
Age 7?
Yeah.
Wow. How big was your school? Were there other kids kind of like you too?
Not really. Looking back, like I really gravitated towards like the disadvantaged kids or kids that I could help because that's where I felt like a sense of belonging.
Mm-hmm.
So felt like, okay, I couldn't interact with the popular kids, I guess to call them, and I couldn't fit in with them with my interests and my curiosity and all that. So I just started like gravitating towards kids that had learning disabilities or were like creative, like artist types.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of been a prominent theme throughout my life of like finding my home or something, my people. But it's been very interesting because I feel like that was a clear indicator saying that like I took on a tutor role at like 7. Like looking back when I asked my family now, I'm like, that seems like really like a big thing. Like, but they treat it like it was like normal.
They I mean it's kind of a common theme in the gifted community that we're often valued for our gifts and our intellect and our achievement and what we can bring, but not, like you said, the whole person.
Yeah.
And I think people don't know what to do with it. So if they can find something where we can use our smarts for something useful, they just stick us in that little box and then they leave us alone and figure the rest of the development will take care of itself, which it often doesn't. So what happened, like maybe as you progressed, junior high and high school? And
So junior high, I really became withdrawn. I had some childhood trauma, so I kind of interfered with that and maybe contributed to that. But I was very withdrawn and like a loner. So
Mm.
my middle school experience was like uh it was probably the darkest period of my life next to high school. Because yeah, I was bullied the most in middle school. That's where I really tried to find a sense of identity, and I found it through like uh Sims games and like just
Oh yeah.
being alone. And um yeah, I kind of was very confused in middle school because in elementary school I had that tutor that we'd read advanced books with, and or I'd read advanced books with them, and I felt some sense of identity. But then once I integrated into middle school, it was like I lost that, and then I became like very quiet, like painfully shy. And yeah.
So they didn't have any gifted services in middle school?
Not that I can recall. I feel like the teachers definitely were like, oh, she's different. Like I was always labeled like eccentric, different,
Mhm.
weird, smart but weird, just couldn't get along with other kids. Or not get along, but couldn't like fit in. And so they didn't really know what the problem was, but they also didn't like suspect like, oh, there's giftedness or some like, I don't know, high intelligence going on or something like that. So then I kind of just gravitated towards the library and just like really became like an autodidact. Yeah.
I'm laughing because that's my exact story too. Junior high is when it all started.
Yeah.
I became an introvert, a misfit, and you're like the third or fourth person I've talked to in the past few weeks that have told that exact same story about middle
Yeah.
school and library and books and all of that.
Yeah.
Wow. Um, did you have siblings or anything that?
No, I was an only child, so
So
that
you
didn't
really were
help.
kind of isolated in your
Yeah.
giftedness. I think like they see it as a challenge. Like if you're a middle school teacher and you're just trying to get through the day with your subject you're hard to teach, they see it as a challenge, maybe, or extra work, or maybe they're intimidated. But I had the same exact reaction. The teachers were almost worse than the kids. I had the same exact reaction
Oh yeah,
from my
teachers.
junior high teachers.
Yeah, teachers really bullied me. I don't remember it fully because it was like probably the most traumatic memory of like teachers, but I had this biology teacher, or no, animal science. And animal science was like the best way to describe it was like animals were like my special interest. If I were to like trying to like explain, like I want to be a veterinarian, like I was obsessed with animals and all things to do with them. So I took animal science and I thought I would find my people there. Well, I had the teacher, like I don't know what I said, but I feel like I said something that she got intimidated by because I asked her a question she didn't have an answer for. So she took my desk and dragged it out of the classroom. And yeah, and I never told anyone to this day. Like I was so shocked because I thought like this was my teacher, that these are my people. Dragged me out, and she told me like if I ever speak to her like that again, she will fail me.
And this was in front of the other kids. She just dragged you out of.
Yeah. And I was really bullied at the time, so no one stood up to it. And I've always had that like sense of justice, like a really strong sense of justice.
Mhm.
And I felt that for myself in the moment, but yeah, moving forward, like I completely gave up my dream of being a veterinarian after that moment. I was like super confused.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. Did were there guidance counselors or anything like that that
I had one that they would always just be like, "Oh, you're smart. Why are you having all these problems?" And I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what's wrong with me. Like, that's where I really started to develop this, like, something's wrong with me versus like what they did to me was wrong. So I remember I got taken out of that class, which I was also in her club. Like, she did an after school club of animals. And I remember the day she pulled me out of the classroom, I still went to the club because I think some part of me thought I'm very forgiving. It's in my nature. So I feel like I just thought like, oh, maybe I did something really wrong. So I went to her club, and I remember like she wouldn't uh interact with me. Like I was isolated, like in the club, where I remember she like took out her pet bunny, and like I wanted to like handle the bunny, and she like wouldn't let me.
But the other kids got to.
Yeah. And that became my experience in middle school where I was literally like isolated by the teachers and the students.
Emerald, you're breaking my heart. I think a lot of it seems a lot of times the teachers kind of set the tone, and if the teachers are doing it, then the kids it follows. It carries on to the playground and after school and in the community. How big was your town or your school?
It was pretty big. I mean, it was a well-known school. Like I lived in a pretty wealthy area, but I wasn't wealthy myself. Like I was in that school because of my grandparents. So
Mm.
it was like this weird thing where I was living in like a studio apartment in this really wealthy town, going to this really wealthy school. And I feel like that contributed to a lot. I feel like there were so many factors that I think led to them not putting me in gifted classes or anything gifted. I had um there was one mother in the school that she like offered to like take me out of school and like have me be homeschooled because she saw how terrible everything was, and my family like wouldn't let her. So that still kind of breaks my heart thinking about, because it's like that could have been my saving grace, I feel like,
Hmm.
because I knew that I wanted to be like homeschooled, but I know that like my mom couldn't do it, my grandparents couldn't do it. But I remember just like it was just so traumatic. Like even thinking back, like those experiences, they definitely stuck with me.
And as an autodidact, you were kind of already homeschooling yourself anyway.
Yeah.
Did
Yeah.
things start to get better for you at any point, like high school or beyond?
So high school was also a strange time because I started at one school. Then I was like, the bullies from middle school were also in my high school. So in high school, I actually had a lot of hope. Like I never let go of my hope. Like out of all these experiences, I always thought I'll find my people, I'll find my teachers. And I remember yeah, high school, I had a lot of hope. I thought I'd make like a lot of friends, and I quickly became isolated in high school too. They kind of put me in a somewhat gifted class. It was like this advanced reading.
Mhm.
Um, but I was so withdrawn and so like alone that I like almost couldn't talk in the class. Like I was so traumatized where it's like I would just write these like really great assignments and get all this good feedback, but I was just like not talking. Like I almost became like a mute. I think they thought I was a mute.
Selective muted. I was the same way in
Yeah.
high school. I didn't talk to anybody. I carried a
I
book
didn't.
around, and if somebody tried to talk, I kept my
Yeah.
face in the book. And if someone tried to talk, I would just glare at them, like Ali Sheedy in The Breakfast Club. I would just glare until they
Yeah.
stopped talking, and then I'd go back to my book, and everyone left me alone.
That's what I did. I stopped going to the lunchroom. I just went to the library
Hmm.
and read books. And I wouldn't even eat because I was so scared. I wouldn't go to the bathroom, the public bathrooms of the school, because they tormented me. Like it was, I don't even know how it was allowed. The level of bullying. Like if I went to gym class, they would steal my clothes, so I'd have to wear my gym clothes all day.
My God.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got taken out of PE. I didn't. My psychologist wrote a note saying he cannot be in
They
PE.
eventually took me out because I could not handle the team sports.
Mm.
I would just stand there. Like we'd be doing volleyball and they'd hit the ball to me and I would like
Nope.
freeze. I was like, I want to go read a book. What is this?
Yeah, that's what I did. They put me in PE with the football players last period, and they did their football practice, and I sat on the bleachers and read books. So I had to take PE to get the credit, but I didn't have to do PE. Like I would come home with giant bruises from the dodge. Like every time we played dodgeball, all the kids aimed the dodgeball at me constantly, and they just pelted me with it. I would come home with big bruises just from the dodgeball.
I hated dodgeball.
Yeah,
That
I do
was
now.
terrible. I hated it. It was like PE was terrible.
Yeah, yeah. It. Oh my God, I can't. I can't. I mean, I guess it's very validating to hear your story to that we're not as weird and alone as we think we are. Did you do 4 years of high school? Did it ever improve at all?
So improved a little bit. So basically, during my freshman year, like halfway through, the bullying got so bad that my grandparents and mom were like, okay, we're just gonna take her out of school and put her in homeschooling. So I did get some homeschooling, but the thing is, I finished all my courses in like the first month, and my
Oh,
mom, yeah, my mom at the time couldn't afford that because she had to pay out of pocket. So this whole thing happened, and uh, the court system got alerted that I wasn't in high school. They viewed me as a high school dropout, and then my dad, who I never met in my life, came into the picture and demanded to take custody of me. So this is like a guy I've never met, want to take custody. So he was granted custody because I completed all those homeschool courses, but my mom didn't pay for them, so I never got the credit for them. And then I moved in with this stranger that I never met, and he put me in a different high school, and I was in a different town. And then I thought that was going to be my fresh start, which it was pretty good. I was still very withdrawn, but I wasn't bullied because I think people just viewed me as like the new girl. And I just kind of went under the radar for 2 years. And I joined some clubs. Like I became a leader of like a sewing club, but I wouldn't really talk. I would just like show people how to sew.
oh.
And then I was in robotics club. And then
Ooh.
interesting enough, what ended up happening is like, I don't know if it's like neurodivergence or giftedness, but I always tended to get along with men better for some reason. And so I made a lot of friends with the guys in like sewing club and robotics club. And that's always been interesting to me because I feel like I should be the opposite.
Did the bullying come from mostly girls?
Yeah. I think that's what stuck with me, where it was like, it was mostly women and girls that would pretend to be my friend and stuff. So like there was a lot of like at my previous high school, the one where I got bullied at, I'd have girls that like show interest in my like interest. Like I really love learning new words and reading. They'd be like, "Oh, what are you reading?" or "What are you learning?" And then they'd like take my book and like rip it apart. Yeah.
You sound awful.
Yeah. So I still am working on trusting women in general due to those experiences because it was pretty awful. And I had some guys bully me here and there, but it wasn't on the same level as
Mhm.
women. So I feel like when I went to my new school, I learned like to survive that I should probably talk to guys more.
Me too. That's been my experience. Like most of my difficulties have come from women, and to this day, I'm still struggling with that.
Yeah.
Did you when you got to college, did you start to meet other people that maybe you could relate to more?
So my college experience has been the most interesting because yet again, I had a lot of hope that I would find my people. I started off at a community college, so really tiny college. Uh the first year, that's where I fell into like tutoring people to like teach them English because I started connecting to like foreign students
Mm.
and also guys again. And I found some people, but then the theme in college has become people kind of using me to get an A in the class. So I would kind of like view them as my friend and trust them. And I would run all these like study groups, but then like at the end of the year, I would text them over summer break and I would get ghosted. Uh, so that's my current experience where it's like I'm finding people and I'm thinking they like me and want to be my friend, and then I'm getting ghosted, and it's like very uncomfortable because it's like now like it's not being bullied, but now it's like being admired, but like not enough for them to like text me back or want to hang out with me outside of school.
We're so naive too. It's not. I mean, you're not being treated the same as everyone else. You're not being like included as a person like
Yeah.
everybody else. Are any of these gifted people? You think?
Um, like have I found any in college?
Yeah, or the people that are doing this to you, are they just normal people?
It's hard to say. I feel like honestly, I feel like the biggest thing I've been bullied for is like just who I am as a person. And I feel like in some ways I've kind of like always been unapologetically myself.
Hmm.
And that's why I can't really relate to like uh, I mean I can and I can't relate to like the masking because it's like I would openly like be reading books and reading dictionaries just like I still do it to this day and it's like people look at me strange like this past semester in my philosophy course, we were reading Being in Time by Heidegger, and
Oh
I
yeah.
didn't know the social norm of like you shouldn't read that just out in the cafeteria. And my professor
Okay.
told me that, like a professor that liked me, he's like, "Hey, and I wouldn't talk about that at dinner parties either." And I'm just like, these are
I would.
things, yeah, like people that don't have my kind of interest, like I don't deem them as like stupid or below me or anything like that. I think I just kind of started viewing my bullies and other people is like either being intimidated and wanting to like bring me down or
Hmm.
kind of like um make me feel bad about myself. And I kind of just view them as like boring and like they don't have much going on in their lives to do that. Like
So you're not internalizing any negative messages about yourself, like when your professor says don't read Heidegger in the lunchroom. Are you able to avoid making that have an impact on you?
I feel like I've done a lot of work and like therapy in my own like journey of like letting those comments go because it's weird when people tell me this stuff, like I get a lot of people tell me like I'm naive for wanting to be like joyful about life or have hope. And people will tell me like life is just gonna hit me one day and I'm gonna wake up and not want to read the books I'm reading or have the interests I have. Like people tell me weird stuff.
How do they know?
I don't know.
Especially if they're not reading the books themselves.
Yeah. Like I just have a lot of people tell me that and like the professor saying like, "Oh, don't read that in the cafeteria." It does feel like the undertone is like, "Don't be yourself." Like
Hmm.
hide that, Emerald. And I just don't listen. I don't know if that's
Okay,
bad
good. No, it's
because
not.
yeah, because a lot of people because you can feel the judgment, like I'm aware of it, especially like even if I'm in a coffee shop and I'm reading like a philosophy book, you get people looking at you like, but to me, it's like if they're allowed to be themselves, why am I not allowed to be myself?
You can't
And
read philosophy books in coffee shops anymore. That used to
people
be.
give you weird looks. I don't know.
I want to go, like, start a philosophy club and get a bunch of people out in public reading philosophy now,
That would be
just to kind
awesome.
of normalize this. What um, what are some of the things that have helped you that you've found to kind of stay sane or not get too traumatized? I call
Honestly,
this social trauma. I consider it a form of trauma, especially the younger you are. It affects your development.
honestly, I sometimes I question how I survived it because on some level, in part, I definitely think the libraries saved me. Books
Mm.
have saved me. I've always referred to books as like it might sound weird, but I refer to them as like my friends. Like
Mhm.
books are like companions to me. And so books, I've always just stayed on like this like on my own path. Like I feel like I'm not um easily persuaded. So like I never fell into like drugs or alcoholism or things that could harm me. And I know that is other people's experiences, but I've just always kind of like my love of learning, my love of knowledge, just my curiosity has kept me on this like, you're okay, you're gonna find your place one day. Like it just was some kind of inner moral compass I've always had. So even though like I've definitely experienced uh like anxieties and depressions from these experiences that have kind of formed me, but I've always just I don't know, stayed true to myself in some way.
That we talked about that definition of giftedness last night from the Columbus group. I'm going to try to find it. Um, an asynchronous development in which advanced cognitive abilities and heightened intensity combine to create inner experiences and awareness that are qualitatively different from the norm. And that's what I think about. Like giftedness is not just intellect; it's an entire different way of experience and being in the world. And it sounds like that core of giftedness in you that kind of kept you on a track that you knew was fit for you, really kind of like that innate resiliency and drive.
Yeah, I think that's I've always tried to like define it, but I feel like it almost can't be defined. Like it's just it's like maybe the energy that encompasses giftedness as a whole, like that energy, it just feels like I can feel it inside me and it's pushed me to just keep going. Like it's just something like sometimes I refer to it like as the universe or God, but I don't know it's like what to call, but just feels like it's like this joy, this like thirst for life. It's like this energy. And I think that's one thing too is like thinking back to like my professor, because that was the most recent example where he was like, hey, don't be reading Heidegger in the cafeteria. I remember like I was looking outside and then like I saw like this really beautiful bird and like I just had this like person say like hide this aspect of yourself. But then I saw a bird and I just felt like all this joy, like pure bliss, like that I could experience this bird on like this heightened level, like the colors, the way it was flying. And that's why I feel like I've always felt like I had this giftedness because like I don't know many people that would just become like inspired by this bird.
Were you aware, like even at a young age, of your giftedness or this joy and intensity?
Yes and no. I do remember like I feel like I was censored in some ways and kind of like taught like how to be quote unquote normal. Because I remember like as a kid, I was way more expressive with like being taken aback by nature or animals or like really feeling like this sense of peace from those things. I remember my family would be like, oh, that's weird. Like, who cares about the bird? Like, yeah, yeah, cool. Let's get to more important things like eat your dinner. Why are you looking at birds? kind of thing. And that's always stuck with me because it was like I couldn't make sense of like what that was within me that would like just have this thirst for life and knowledge like that it didn't make sense to me. So like I was always like searching for a word to describe that.
Did you have any friends growing up or anybody that you played with or could relate to, watch movies with, anything?
I had a few. I had one thing that's always stuck with me is I've kind of always had like one friend that I would like cling on to and kind of make my person in a
Mhm.
way. So I had this one friend, Amanda, who lived on my block and we connected through like our love of dance. Like I think I have like a psychomotor overexcitability. Like I just love dancing and I'll just dance freely, like to this day in supermarkets and grocery
Oh yeah,
stores. I
me
don't
too.
care what people think. Like it's like this form of transcendence. Like I'm transcending my
It's
experience.
spontaneous. I don't. Yeah, don't even
Yeah.
notice I'm doing it sometimes.
Yeah. And so we bonded through dance and we would watch like movies and stuff. She had like a very controlling family though. So we wouldn't be able to like have movie nights and sleepovers as often as I would have liked as a kid.
Oh,
But I am grateful that I had that. And then I had another friend on the same block and we kind of like would ride bikes a lot and go into nature. As a kid, I was either like in books, in nature, or dancing. Yeah.
that sounds very enriching to
Yeah.
me, especially for a gifted person. And you mentioned some of the overexcitabilities, like psychomotor and emotional, and that comes from Dabrowski as well. He had this theory that, and it's not necessarily gifted, a theory for gifted people, but a lot of gifted people kind of see themselves in the theory and appropriate it for giftedness. But there's intellectual overexcitability, which is the curiosity. There's the
Mhm.
emotional, which you've talked about, like seeing the bird and feeling that intense joy. Psychomotor, the dancing, and imaginational, and then sensory overexcitability, which could be color, sound, light, but it could also be, in my case, it's art, books, movies, paintings, that kind of stuff really kind of stimulate me and excite my mind. So those are all features that he identified that make up the types of personalities that have the developmental potential to use positive disintegration to grow from.
Mm. Yeah, I feel like out of some part of me wants to say I have all five, but I feel like to varying degrees, I feel like we all probably have all five.
Yeah,
But
and there may not only be five. I mean, it could be like just a constellation of different things that he picked out discrete elements of.
yeah, because I feel like one thing that actually, because finding like my own giftedness has felt like I was putting together a puzzle my whole life and I was missing pieces. Because one thing was as a kid, like starting at age 6, I feel like I had an imaginational overexcitability that I wasn't afraid to show. And so I'd write a lot of like stories and like little books and stuff. And I remember my teachers, like every year, they would always say, "Oh, well, you're a gifted writer." I remember always looking at that, like, well, what is a gifted writer? Like, and then I would like separate the two, like, okay, writer, gifted. Then I was like, that was like my first clue of like giftedness, I feel like.
Were you aware that no one else around you was doing this kind of writing? Like, did you seem different to yourself?
Yeah, I still have my little children's books that I wrote as a child.
Oh,
So it's interesting because I was part of like the young authors program. So they had a program at my school, which I think that could have been a gifted program just called young authors, because I don't know how a 7-year-old is an author. Like that seems out there, but I was in this program. So similar to like being taken out of class by that tutor, I would be taken out of class and I would write stories with high school students.
wow.
So I would help them with their stories and they would help me with my stories. And that was my dream as a kid. I wanted to be a writer. But that kind of got bullied out of me because a lot of kids were like, oh, writers are broke and poor and all this crazy
Even
stuff.
with the young authors program?
So I feel like in that program, I didn't really voice my dream of wanting to be a writer. Because I feel like because I was 7, I think I was in the program from like 7 to 10 years old. Um, through the bullying and stuff, I kind of just would like communicate through my writing. So I think I felt like I was communicating my own inner experience through these books. But like I wrote one book about a princess that just ran away to her own island and like found her people on this island. And it was like all these like aquatic animals.
Oh,
And I was like, as a kid, I was viewing myself as that princess. Like I wanted to escape to an island somewhere. So I wrote this story about this princess escaping to this island and finding her people and finding a sense of belonging. And I think as a kid, I thought like people were like that they realized I was identifying with that character, but I didn't say that. So to them, it probably just seemed like I was writing this book about this princess.
oh yeah. Did any of them? Did they help publish any of them?
So they were just like published through like my school. Like basically, I don't know what they did with them. I kind of want to like find that out or something because I feel like that was an aspect of my life where like my family just kind of like normalized it. And that felt like a very profound thing, at least looking back, that I was just reading these books and that I was even just communicating and interacting with high school students as a 7-year-old
Right.
means like and these teachers that weren't even from my school coming to talk to me about this book. Like looking back, it's like it seems so obvious that there was giftedness at play.
I think a lot of people just don't know what to do with it. Like if they're not gifted, they like even in the movie last night, they just don't know what to do with it. And so they make their best guess or they try or they work it into their own agenda or their own vision for the person. Um, I think more gifted advocacy, mentorship, advocacy, more understanding of what giftedness is for the adults that do work with gifted kids. What would you say to other gifted people or maybe younger gifted people that might just be discovering their own giftedness or just anything you want to say about giftedness?
I feel like I would tell a younger person, like, just hold on to that inner joy, hold on to your passions, hold on to what makes you you. Don't let society put you into a box or categorize you. Just live authentically, whatever that means to you. And I feel like you'll find your people eventually. It just becomes, I guess, it's just all based on time and experience. But I feel like most gifted people, if not all, they do find their tribe at some point, I feel like. And so I also, most importantly, like, just be yourself. Don't let anyone dim your light, dim your joy. Just speak freely. Don't feel like you're a know-it-all. Don't feel like you're too weird, too strange. Like, just, yeah, find what brings you passion, find what brings you joy, and just like hold on to that for dear life, and don't let anyone tell you differently.
Wow. I do know, and especially now with the internet, it's a lot easier to find and connect with other gifted people probably that's out there. There's several networks I know, that websites that it's a good place to start. Some people struggle, I think, with not letting society put them in a box or influence who they become. What are some thoughts you might have around how to keep society from over influencing you too much and staying on that authentic path?
I feel like it's very difficult because I feel like as a gifted, if you're an unidentified gifted person, you can find some peace and solace, I think, in society boxing you in a category. Like, oh, you're a nerd, go with the other nerds.
Mm.
Oh, you're an artist, go with the creatives. So I feel like a way to push back against that is to just honor yourself and think that you're multi-layered. Even with giftedness, like, it's such a complex inner experience. So I think viewing yourself as a complex individual with complex needs, complex thoughts, and just like, I think a good way to combat society is like just being yourself in that way. Even if you do get people telling you like, oh, don't read Heidegger in a cafeteria, don't read philosophy at a coffee shop. It's like, what's wrong with that? I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I think society has created these, like, I think the words like neuronormative social norms, like these unspoken rules we all have to abide by. And I feel like you can just be you. Like, as difficult as it is in this society, I feel like you have that inner right. And that's what brings me peace, is that I am allowed to be who I want to be. If I'm not hurting anyone, if I'm not causing any harm, like, there's nothing inherently negative about just being your true authentic self. And I feel like
And I
that,
think it's mentally healthier too when you
yeah.
don't have to pretend or mask or hide yourself. And so I guess like thinking critically about these norms, if you have the ability to think critically about them, you don't have to kind of so automatically adopt them. And which that would be in line with Dabrowski too. You can pick and choose and self-determine whether you adopt the norm or not instead of just adopting it. That's what he calls a state of primary integration, where people are socialized into a particular worldview or religion or political stance, and they just automatically absorb it because it's what they were taught. And the disintegration helps kind of break that up and allow you to critically think about the norms that, and then consciously adopts the ones that fit with who you are, instead of just being stuck with the ones you absorbed from society.
Yeah, because I feel like it is difficult to kind of separate yourself from the norms you kind of grew up in, or kind of, um, if you became socialized in a certain way, it's kind of hard to undo that, which I totally get. But I feel like it's an important thing to, especially for gifted people and um, just neurodivergence in general, to really think critically about those things and what norms you're taking on. Like, are they your own norms, things you actually believe in, or are they society's?
Yeah, and especially for neurodivergent people like autism, it's becoming aware of those norms to begin with, and being able to see the norms and how they operate in your life and in your psyche.
Yeah. I feel like, yeah, it's very difficult. I feel like navigating society just as a gifted person, as someone like with certain interests and yeah, I wish there was like a easy roadmap, so to speak, to navigate it all, like navigate jobs, navigate people. It's like, because I think another thing is like I've become very interested in like the occupations gifted people choose, because I think I see a lot of people like they become psychologists, professors, but I'm seeing a lot like they survive, so to speak, in like academia versus like I'm kind of interested like uh I think in a more like holistic view of giftedness where like obviously not every gifted person wants to be in academia or like,
Yeah, I didn't.
and I feel like giftedness is very connected to academia. Like if you are gifted, like, oh, just go to why
It's
aren't
a path that's kind of already been smoothed for you. But
yeah,
then what do the rest of us do? Or
yeah.
what are our options?
So I feel like that's another tricky thing when it comes to like honoring yourself and what you want. Cause like then society can kind of make you feel bad that you're not doing something amazing with your talents or gifts, that you're not transforming the world. Like I feel like there's all these like cartoonish um labels or ideas that people have about gifted people. Like they should just go, oh, if you're gifted, why can't you go cure cancer?
Right, go save the world.
Go save the world.
Which I mean, I'm trying to in my own way, and I'm sure you are too. But there is kind of a sense with giftedness that with the gift comes a sense of responsibility. I know I have like this drive to try to use my gift in a positive way to help society, but on my own terms in ways that I determine. So it does kind of come with an extra burden of you're not just an ordinary person. You have this gift and you should do something with it to make the world a better place. So I could understand it from that perspective, but I think not letting someone else tell you how to use your gift, but I mean, it's your gift. You have to figure it out.
Yeah. And I feel like giftedness and imposter syndrome kind of go hand in hand just by being in the society we're in, because I'll constantly second guess myself or I'll have some kind of self-doubt and I'll try to like combat that. But it's like it's difficult because imposter syndrome will just tell you like, no, you can't do that, or that's weird, that's strange. Like it's just like this running dialogue. And I also recently learned that a lot of people don't have like complex inner worlds and like a running dialogue in their
What do
heads.
they have?
Some people just have like, I forgot what it's called. There's like a special term, but it's like they just think something and that's it. Like it's just a thought and it's like, yeah,
Oh, I can't even imagine what that's like.
yeah. I can't envision it. It's like, how does that work?
Another thing I think that helps with stuff like imposter syndrome and just giftedness in general is it's harder when you're isolated. When you're the lone gifted person, then you have a hard time measuring yourself. So having other gifted people and peers to mirror and reflect your giftedness so you could see yourself in them and vice versa and get a better sense of who you are. And we have communities now. In fact, tonight's our Zoom. If you're gifted or twice exceptional, neurodivergent, you can come join us. It's in about an hour, 7 p.m. Central.
Yeah.
We meet every week and we watch movies on Thursday. We watched the Gifted movie last night. So through communities like that, I'm finding that people are kind of getting more support for things like imposter syndrome and figuring out their mission and how to use their gift in a healthy way.
Yeah. Cause I think that's the thing too, is like I'm learning about all these things associated with giftedness. And like the one thing that's been really powerful about the Bloomers group in the Zoom chats I've been in is like I wasn't prepared for that mirroring. Like it kind of really
Oh,
surprised me. Like I didn't know how to handle it. Like I was kind of like, I need a process. Like I'm a very deep processing kind of person. So I was like, I was like, whoa, like, because I felt mirroring from you during the first Zoom chat and then other people. And it was like this, like, it was really powerful because it was like, this is what I've been missing my entire life. Like, it made me like try to reorganize all my experiences.
oh wow. I guess especially if you haven't had it in a while, and then all of a sudden you have all of it coming from 10 people all at once.
Yeah.
Because when you get even a few gifted, you get two or three of really intense, powerful, gifted people in a room. The conversation, the energy, it can get very heightened very quickly.
Yeah. And that's why I wasn't prepared for it because I think, um, because it's different than like, um, being in like a philosophy class. Cause like I always, before I knew I was gifted, I just gravitated towards like really deep, complex classes. So I became like a philosophy minor as well as a psychology major.
Me too, same here.
And in my philosophy classes, even like professors and things are like, you're really intense. And I'm like, this is philosophy. What are like,
Have you read the philosophers?
yeah.
Are we
And
intense?
and in classes, I guess there's this thing where like it'd be like a lot of professors would have like 15 minutes of kind of like talking about mundane topics or like just some way to kind of introduce the topic at hand. And like to me, I was like ready to go. Like, let's talk philosophy.
Oh, I hate introduction. That's one of
Yeah.
my criticisms of Sam Harris is he gives these big long. He tells you what he's about to tell you and then just give me the content.
Yeah.
I've told this story before about my ex he had a philosophy degree
Mhm.
and he said I was too deep for him. Like not just
Oh
deep, I was
wow.
way too deep for him. And I had that same like cognitive dissonance of wait, this is philosophy. How is intensity bad? How is depth bad? You think you're in environments that can contain and sustain that.
Like I became an outsider in the philosophy department at my school. Like it was like because they're the ones
That
they know the norms of like not reading openly reading philosophy books, not openly watching philosophy YouTubers because I have a tendency to do that. And you can see on my laptop, I guess, when I'm in the cafeteria watching them, people are like, "Oh, why aren't you watching TikTok or some?"
go watch your own
Yeah,
show.
yeah,
That's to me almost an indication of the philosophy department itself and not you at all. Like that's a shortcoming in the philosophy department because an ideal philosophy department
yeah.
you would be able to have deep conversations, be intense, read Heidegger in the lunchroom, and watch whatever the hell you want on your laptop without people stigmatizing you for it. So if it's the philosophy department that's propagating these messages, that says more about them.
Yeah. Which has been, yeah, it's a very weird experience that like, um, I've been considered really deep in philosophy departments. I've been considered really deep with therapists where they're like, whoa, like, can we just simplify everything? Like, they're like, why are you thinking on such a complex level about people? Cause like my friendships and stuff for people I encounter, I'll like sit there and like create stories in my mind of them and their personality and their values and stuff. And like, that's fun to me. I don't know if it's like, because I know that it's not them, like the actual them. I have to get to know them, but I have a tendency to like talk really deep about people and things and books. And the message is always like, you're too intense, you're too much. What is this? Or I've gotten compared to, I forgot the movie, but it's with um what's it called? Barbara Streisand. I forgot the title, but she's like she plays a really intense character and she tries to like date this guy that's like more one-dimensional. And I've had like therapists comparing me to like that character because she's like has like a strong sense of justice and yeah. I think it's called like The Way We Were, maybe, or something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's hard. I mean, it's because it's not too for us. It's too much or whatever for them. but it's our norm. That's our baseline. That's we wake up in the morning at that level, and
Like, how do we be anything else? That's
I
what
don't
I
have a
like.
lower setting.
Yeah, I don't have, I approach everything with like such a fierce energy too, where it's like, not everyone likes that, I know, but it's like, even if they don't like it, I'm still unapologetically myself. Like, I'll just have,
Yeah.
it's always you're too intense, you're too this, you're too that. But it's weird and it's like almost paradoxical because people will tell me that, and then I'll still feel like whatever I'm doing isn't enough, or it's like I'm
Right.
not enough.
Yeah.
So it's like I want to surpass what I'm already am. And it's like,
It's just finding the settings that kind of you can do it in and that support that instead of try to work against it. And that's what I found. That's why I try to create little niches for myself to be in. And when I get little red lights that, oop, this is the wrong place, they're starting to react negatively. I'm not an asset anymore. It's becoming a liability or stressor for them. Then I start having to shift to a different group or community. And it's finding that zone or that sweet spot of people that not only can tolerate rate you, but you support and kind of empower and inspire each other.
yeah, because I've learned in my experience, if you're in a room where you're just like tolerated, it's like you're kind of lacking that support and that like mutual connection. So it's like
Yeah.
I've been in spaces, like the philosophy space at my university where it's like I was tolerated, like people wouldn't openly like bully me or say mean things, but I wasn't necessarily accepted for my full self. I was kind of just accepted for what I could contribute in philosophical discussions. And one interesting thing too was like professors, like other students would talk, but they would like hold me to a higher standard. And that's always been my experience too, where you're like held to a higher standard than like other people. So they could say something and then the professor will like, okay, good, good. And then I'll talk and they'll be like, oh, can you expand on that? Can you clarify that? Can you do this? Like it was all these extra things.
And the other people are not being
Yeah.
nice to that.
And that would actually, in a way, make them like dislike me because it's like it was almost like special treatment. Like I was kind of treated in this like superior way. And like I kind of saw that and I kind of disliked it because it's like kind of like pitting students against each other in a way.
Yeah. I mean, at least you're not being bullied, but you're not getting the growth either. It's
Yeah.
finding the soil that, like, just the right soil that where you can grow.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else you want to say about trauma or mental health to kind of wrap up with?
So I feel like that's the other thing that I think also intrigues me is like I think gifted people sadly either like you mentioned like they have that trauma from society, from the educational system, from like their families, and I feel like in my experience I think giftedness kind of amplifies trauma and you're experiencing a trauma and processing a trauma because it feels like it's all amplified. Like especially for me, I don't know if it's a gifted thing, but I feel like I have a more like eidetic photographic memory where I can like recall things in like extreme detail, and that includes positive and negative experiences. And I feel like that uh is under research, especially like in psychology. Like people I talk to, like, that's weird. Like I don't remember my experiences when I was like 2 or 3, but I can like recall in vibrant detail and like my emotions are attached to those experiences. And like that's very interesting because I feel like giftedness and trauma, like they have a lot of overlap. And how we experience trauma, I think, is comparatively different to how other people experience trauma, because that's kind of been an observation of mine.
Especially since trauma is so memory based. So when we do
Yeah.
replay, we replay it at that full intensity and that vivid detail. And we're with the sensitivities, we like things may be trauma to us that may not be trauma to other people because we have like a higher or a lower threshold for what affects us deeply.
Yeah, like it feels like we have like finely tuned antennae that are like on the top
Yeah.
of our heads, like invisible. And it's like, up, that situation is okay. That one might get traumatized there. Like, so I feel like there is a lot of research to be done on giftedness and just neurodivergence, because I do view giftedness as its own form of neurodivergence.
I do
And
too.
I think the experience of trauma, like to some extent, I feel like all the current like treatment models for treating trauma, they don't really cover like trauma and giftedness. It's kind of like a lot of trauma therapists I've had, they're like, you should be healed now, or like, why are you still thinking about people in a complex manner, and like, or you should be fixed by now. And fixed, I don't like that terminology.
You don't recover for like trauma doesn't go away. You learn how to
Yeah,
manage it, and you
yeah,
you can grow like post traumatic growth. You can grow from it,
yeah,
but it always has the potential to come back.
yeah, like a healing journey. I feel like not like a healing destination.
Right.
Yeah.
What are some maybe techniques or tips that you found that help you manage your trauma?
For me, journaling, kind of creating my own journaling routine, like uh it's very complex, like picking out pens and colorful journals, things to like
Oh,
stimulate my senses, which in return keeps me grounded while I journal, because now I'm like intentionally picking out the pen I want to use, the journal I want to use. So that's helped me. Being in nature, I always call nature my
oh yeah.
sanctuary. Nature is just, yeah, it's my biggest coping mechanism. Uh, Outside of that, um, I do some somatic stuff. Like if I'm ever anxious, I kind of like rub my hand like this. That's always helped me. Or like, um, yeah, some somatic stuff like that. I do a lot of like grounding, like thinking of like, what's around me, trying to stay in the present moment, a lot of like mindfulness. I do
Mm.
yoga. I do some kickboxing to kind of get out that anger, that repressed
Oh wow.
anger. Um, I do some painting. Um, Aside that, I think just like, oh, and then reframing my experiences. And then um, I'm a big believer in like neuroplasticity, where like our brains are malleable. We can replace negative experiences with positive ones and kind of weaken those neuronal connections in our brain from trauma. So I'm a big proponent of that. And just um yeah, also compassion and grace are huge. Having that
Like
self
self compassion.
yeah, self-compassion is big. And then helping others also helps me, like trying to be what I call like a lighthouse in the world, like being that beacon of hope or that beacon of strength as much as I can be without hurting myself in any way.
Uh-huh.
So those have been my biggest coping mechanisms. Yeah.
Yeah, I can relate to most of them.
Yeah. Do you have any others that have really helped you?
A lot of mine are cognitive, kind of that reframing and perspective taking. I've talked about how I manage the initial reaction, like I'll use cold water, or like because it's the sympathetic nervous system, so you kind of shock your body back into its baseline, and then once I do that part, I can start using cognitive techniques. Nature helped me a lot, especially with the grief.
Mm.
It really kind of allowed me time to have a clear head and process and that I
Mm.
couldn't do in the city around people. And physical activity has always helped me. Like I love to hike and that kind of
Mhm.
stuff. I don't get to do it as much since COVID, but I would like to get back into that. I think more physical activity would probably do wonders. Really, the thing that helps me most is the community support, like finding a healthy community of
Mhm.
people like ourselves that get me, and I can get that support, give that support, and it creates that healthy feedback loop that everybody benefits from. So I think that's probably the thing I try to focus on the most is just making sure I have a healthy support network and using that when I need it and fortifying it and investing in it in the meantime.
Yeah, I definitely agree because I think another thing that helps me because like I tend to intellectualize a lot of things. Like I can intellectualize my emotions or intellectualize situations where I'll be like, oh, I'm not feeling sad. It's just due to this instead of like allowing myself to feel my feelings.
Mhm.
So another thing I wanted to add is like just feeling your feelings, I think does wonders with trauma work, where it's just letting yourself feel them, and especially as a gifted person, like even if they're super intense, like the way I experience a bird is the way I experience a breakup or a friend saying something hurtful. So it's like I have to really manage that intense emotional experience and modulate it. So I feel like just allowing myself to feel my feelings has been the biggest thing in my journey because it's like they can feel intense. They can feel like, you know, it's so deep. And I try not to like judge myself for that. But I also don't really outwardly express it outside of like kickboxing. So I kind of just internalize it and work with it internally.
Wow, that really has me thinking because mine got so overwhelming at some point that it shut down and I dissociated. And
I've had
I
that
won't let
too.
myself feel them because it's like so much of a current all at once that my body doesn't even know how to absorb all of it. So you have me thinking about ways to maybe start feeling some of that again, as intense as it is.
It's difficult. Like I found myself like I learned how to monitor it where it's like I will almost like do like, oh, that's like a that feeling might be at like 40% intensity. Let's stop it there before it gets to like
So you're able
80%.
to feel a little bit without all of it coming back at once.
Yeah, in some ways. It's
That's what I need to figure out how to do.
I think it's part of disassociation because I'll still disassociate. I'll know when I'm disassociating because I'll just run off to like thoughts like I just want to go to an island by myself or I just want to get away from all people. Like that's when I know I'm starting to disassociate from my feelings because I start thinking these big extreme things. And then I kind of tune back into myself and I'm like, I'll notice like a feeling there and then like I just kind of approach it with curiosity and intentionality where I'm like, what is this feeling? Instead of being like, you're bad for feeling this or shut it down, even though that's been my default to just shut it down and or I'll worry about that later as if emotions work that way. Or like
There's that
I'll
too,
put that off.
and escapism as well.
Escapism is a big one. That's the one I'm still learning to work with because it's so
Because a
easy.
lot of time you don't, it doesn't feel like escapism. It feels like your curiosity is moving you into something that's exciting and stimulating, but it's actually helping you run from something as well.
Yeah. It's difficult to know when it's you're running away or when you're just following your
Yeah,
curiosity.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Emerald, this has been one of the most inspirational conversations I've had in a while. I think you have a
Oh
very
wow.
bright future as a
Oh,
trauma therapist, particularly for gifted neurodivergent people. I got a lot out of it, and I can't thank you enough. So,
thank you. Thank you so much for having me and for uh listening to my story and giving me this opportunity because I'm really grateful. And it's also this is the first time I've talked about my experience with giftedness on a public platform. So
oh,
thank
well,
you.
I don't know how public we're yet. We're still only have
Yeah.
a few viewers, but thank you for sharing it. Like it really helps me to hear the stories of other gifted people, how they grew up as well.
Yeah. I hope that this reaches other gifted people somehow and especially younger people so they can hear that like they're not alone and that
Mhm.
they can find their people, find their passion and just like be themselves because the last thing is just be yourself unapologetically and don't listen to society.
Well, I'm gonna share it and promote it as much as I can, and feel free to do the same. So wherever you want to share it.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you again, and come back anytime, and we can talk more. And are you going to the thing tonight?
Yeah, I'll be there.
Okay, well then I'll
Yeah.
see you in an hour at the Zoom. So if you want to come to the weekly Zoom, just email me, primalhex, primalhex at gmail.com. Same name on Twitter, and I can get you a link. And other than that, have a good weekend, everyone, and I'll see you tomorrow. And thanks again.
Thank you. Bye.